What's up, everybody? We are back with another $2 deck tech for 2DH, a format we created to have a new meta for Commander and to make the game more accessible to new players and players on a budget. This is not necessarily a new player friendly deck, as it is designed to be a very controlling deck. I consider this to be clean control. I really don't run any threats, and the goal of the deck is to make my opponents scoop. So really the only win condition in the deck is Elixir of Immortality, because there's going to come a point in the game where you realize you are going to run out of cards before you find a way to kill me. At least that's the goal. The deck is very beatable. It can be overrun, and one of the reasons I chose Isperia as my commander is in a pinch you can cast her and hopefully draw into an answer as your opponents are swarming you with creatures. She is the backup plan, sort of like only cast her if you're about to die, or if you absolutely have to kill someone with commander damage before they clock you because you don't have an answer to what they're doing. It's okay to do that as well. But the goal is to never cast Isperia. It's really not a build around commander deck like a lot of my other ones are. This is just a deck I pushed really hard in one direction, which is to just be a complete answers deck. It might sound like it's no fun to play against, but there is quite a bit of tension in the mid-game where you're trying to turn that corner and get the tempo and wrest control of the game. Once you have control of it, it's usually going to be a runaway at a certain point, and your opponent will realize that and scoop. One of the ways to convince them to do so is Capsize. This is a great utility card, and I also consider it a win condition in the sense that I get to a point where I have no good targets for Capsize, and I have 12 or 18 mana, and I can just simply start returning your mana base back to your hand. The only person who's really made me do that is my dear friend Jason. He's a very stubborn person, and we played a 4-hour game where I returned every permanent to his hand. Started out 4 players, so that's one of my favorite memories of this deck. I did finally cast Isperia and killed him with it because the game store was going to close, but I feel like I proved to him that I had out-dirtled him in that game. This is a dirtle deck, and in order to dirtle, you are going to need lots of card advantage, and you're going to need to be able to find answers. Impulse is great for that. Ponder is great to set up your draw. Compulsive Research if you're getting flooded. Frantic Search is just a free spell and an auto-include. Ingenuity is great because you can hold up Counterspell. Treasure Cruise, just one of the best draw spells in Magic, and in this deck it's very easy to cast for 1 or 2 mana. Blue Sun can just put away the game in the late game. And finally, Recurring Insight, potentially the best card draw in the format. Nothing feels as good as drawing like 6 cards off a Recurring Insight and then hitting Spellbook. There's no Reliquary Tower in the format, so this is the kind of jank I'm working with in order to run a control deck. You might think this card is just not good enough, but as soon as I put it in the deck, I was very happy to have it. There's so many times where I had to discard 5 or 6 or 7 cards, and I'm trying to guess at what answers I'm going to need and whether or not I'll draw lands. So Spellbook just solves all those problems for you. You just keep all of your cards, and it lets you do some stuff later in the game that I'll show you. Monastery Siege, printed in Fate Reforged. Just a really great card filtering spell. It's exactly what you want on the curve, 3 mana to start figuring out what you're going to need to take control of the game. Haunted of Seeing Winds is a very underrated card. It's a bit of an investment, but if this lands on turn 5, there's oftentimes you're going to draw 10 cards off of this card before the game reaches a conclusion. Staffing In makes perfect sense in a control deck, can mop up little 1 toughness creatures, just a really strong card. And of course, Future Sight just wins games by itself, just lets you churn through your deck, hit every land drop. And here's some of the lands I run in this deck. Myriad Landscape. A lot of people run tons of rocks in control decks. I don't like to have 20 rocks and have a bunch of dead draws later in the game just to accelerate early. I'm not really accelerating into anything in this deck. I'm just trying to gain card advantage over time and not die. So I just like to get a couple of lands into play. I've got Azorius Signet, Talisman of Progress, and I only run 2 others. Commander Sphere because it cycles, and Pristine Talisman because of the incidental life gain. So you can see I'm going to be getting some cards not a ton of ramping, and then here are all of my creatures. There's only 4 of them. Archaeomancer and Mnemonic Wall, I only run them to get spells back. They're nice little chump blockers too occasionally. Ixodron is a very important card in the deck. Once the Tuck rule went away, there was a lot less ways to deal, permanently deal with very difficult commanders, and Ixodron is an early game way to really shut them down. You're happy to take 2 damage from someone's general a few times instead of having them be able to use their activated abilities or otherwise synergize with their general. And what control deck doesn't want a Resolute Archangel? Going back to 40 life, being able to recur this card a couple times is really insane. I mean, I can capsize this, recast it, all kinds of things, but this is just such a good card in any mid-range or control deck in white. I would run it in any deck. I've got 11 counterspells. Normally I don't run just tons of counterspells, but that's what I'm trying to do in this deck, is stop my opponents from advancing the game. So just saying no over and over is what I'm going for. Muddle the Mixture is a really great utility because I can use this transmute effect to find an answer when I'm behind. When you're way behind on board, having a counterspell just isn't any good for you, but being able to go get a removal spell to deal with the biggest threat is exactly what the Doctor ordered in this deck. So these are just the best of the best counterspells. Counterspell, Disdainful Stroke, the CMC is usually pretty high in the format. Condescend and Dissolve are nice because of the Scry. Then you've got Arcane Denial, Dream Fracture, and Dismiss, which are nice because of the draw. Rewind is great because you get to hold up the mana instead of tapping all the way out, and you can at least fake having another counter spell or hit a card draw spell. And then finally, Forbid is just the closer in this deck. You've seen how many cards I can come up with, and being able to just forbid the important threats that your opponent have, if you're drawing more cards than them, is just really a frustrating way for your opponent to play the game. And if you're playing blue right, you're going to be able to pick and choose what you actually need to deal with and what you can just 2-for-1 later. I chose to build this deck around Dismiss into Dream. I've always thought this card was really cool, and I thought it'd be great to build a really slow control deck and try to get some value out of this. And I think I found some pretty clever ways to do it. This card helped out a lot. This card a lot of people went crazy about because you can just keep adding counters to your creature each turn. But the bottom line is what I use it for, and it means that on each opponent's turn, I tap target creature they control. And if Dismiss into Dream is in play, that means I'm just slowly wiping the board on each opponent's turn. It's just a really gross interaction, and it's just one of the lockout pieces in this deck. There's some really sweet lands that can target. Mystifying Maze I would run anyways. It's really good at blinking something that's suited up or has counters on it or whatever. Not great against ETB creatures, but if I have Dismiss into Dream in play, when I target the creature, they just sacrifice it and it's not going to come back. I also found this card. This was printed in 1995, and I'm assuming it's never actually seen play anywhere because it's like 25 cents. It doesn't tap for mana, but it's like a poor man's Mazavith. It taps a creature without flying that's attacking me, and that creature will not untap. And again, with Dismiss into Dream, we're just getting there. We're living the dream, folks. The worst land in From the Vaults, Desert. You'll take a little bit of damage, and then you'll tap Desert, and you guessed it, goodbye creature. And finally, the jankiest card, the most do-nothing card in the deck, it's Talaria. It plays just like an island, but it lets you target a creature, whether or not it has banding. It lets you target a creature, and that's all you had to say for that card to get jammed into this deck. On my upkeep, you sacrifice your best creature. It's just so fun to do these kind of effects, and this really is what 2DH is all about, is just taking these bulk rares and these jank cards that no one's ever heard of and finding a way to not only have fun with them, but actually win a game of Magic with them. That's what I love about this format. Expedition Map is great because it can find any of these lands. There's one other important land I'll tell you about in a minute that I often search up with this. And I told you about the difficulty of dealing with generals now. Declaration of Naught and Nevermore are two very important cards in the deck, because a lot of the times people have built their deck around their general, and even if their general is already in play, I can just play one of these cards, name their general, find a way to bounce it or have a wrath effect, and then they're just shut off from that outlet. And a lot of times that's where they're going to get a ton of card advantage, or just find a way to threaten me, is through their general, and these cards just take someone off of those generals. Telepathy, really strong card. I can't believe this card's under $2. Everyone plays with their hands revealed. I then get to pick and choose when I hold up Counterspell, when I play my Wrath effect. It shows me who's the threat, and it's just so much information to have as a control player. It's very strong effect, and for 1 mana, it's just insane. Propaganda is actually right on the line now. This card's almost over $2, but for the time being, it's in the deck, and it's really great against people who have a ton of creatures or who need to tap out to cast their hasty creature. Just buys me some time. Another thing that happens is people don't really know how to play against control sometimes, and if I can just cast a spell and dissuade someone from swinging at me, they're oftentimes going to be bored and just want to swing at someone else, and then those players start trading resources, and that's exactly what I want to happen. I just want to quietly sit here and build up card advantage and board state and kind of suss out who's doing what in the game. And the more my opponents trade resources, the more likely it is I'm going to be able to just create a lockout state and take over. Sphere of Safety is another great effect for that. This deck plays quite a few enchantments, as you've seen. Someone oftentimes has to pay 4 just to swing at me with something. Some of the artifacts I found very useful. Portcullis. If somebody just has a couple mana dorks in play, and I can sneak the Portcullis down onto the table, no one else really gets to do anything for a while because all their creatures are set aside. This is also a really funny card to cast an Archaeomancer or a Resolute Archangel or an Ixodron. I'll just cast it right into this. I'll get a little bit of value out of it. It'll go into the Portcullis, and then at some point in time, someone can blow this up, or I can bounce it, and then I'll get that ETB effect once again. Meekstone, another great way just to deal with creatures. Again, this deck just runs tons of answers against creatures. Really, one of the only ways it loses is like direct damage and things like that. Things that can't be prevented, but really strong deck against creatures. I run Pithing Needle. I think this is one of the most underrated cards in Commander. It's just great utility. There's almost always something important to name. If it's not a creature, if it's an activated ability of something else, you can almost always take somebody off of something that's important to their deck with this card, and it just provides me the utility I need. Relic of Progenesis. I use my graveyard a fair amount, so exiling all graveyards isn't the best thing ever. But if you put this down early, you can just keep the player who's reanimating. You can just keep them off their graveyard the whole game by removing 1 card over and over and over. And then once I have hit an Elixir of Immortality, it's great just to remove graveyards. Arcane Lighthouse. One of the few ways I have to deal with hexproof creatures other than wrath effects. Swiftfoot Boots is really popular in the format, so I encourage everybody to run an Arcane Lighthouse if you have any kind of a mid-range or control build. And then everyone should run Ghost Quarter. There's no reason not to. This deals with a lot of different things. In this deck, most important would be like a Flamekin Village that can give a creature haste or something like that. There's a couple of other effects, but Ghost Quarter is just a really nice utility thing. It's also great against Capsize, so some people think Capsize is overpowered. If you just run a Ghost Quarter, I can't capsize your land because you can get rid of it and then Capsize is gone. So Elixir of Immortality is very important to the deck. One of the ways I can lose is by milling myself out and losing the Elixir, and Buried Ruin gets it back. This can also get back Staffing In and some other important things. Alright, next up is the Wrath package and Removal package. Day of Judgment, really great to have a 4-mana Wrath. This can just sometimes win you the game just by setting the table back if a bunch of people overcommit. End Hostilities, super strong, again, against like Swiftfoot Boots being on a creature. They're going to lose all permanents attached to that creature. Rout, fantastic card because you can do it at instant speed. You can wait for people to overcommit and just tap 7 mana. Fated Retribution. is another one of those effects. I mean, that effect is just so strong that having a really expensive card in the deck like this is just worth it, because when you get there, you need this effect, and doing it at instant speed is just so much value. Occasionally you can do it on your turn to scry, but normally it's instant speed. Achroma's Vengeance, I found myself actually cycling this card more than casting it, because I have so many enchantments and artifacts that are good for me, but gosh, when you curve into this, you can just obliterate the field. It can be really devastating for players who just put out a bunch of combo pieces, and everyone casts their general once, and you can just really get them with this. It's a great top deck sometimes when you're just getting overrun by someone's enchantment synergies or something like that. Sometimes it's worth losing your own stuff. Comeuppance is such a fantastic card. Unless you're a really aggressive deck, put this card in your deck, try it out. It can just completely devastate someone's board. A lot of times you'll have like one chump blocker, and they'll be like, all right, well, maybe they have one removal spell or something, and they swing all out at you, and you just one-sided wrath their board for 4 mana at instant speed. The card is great. Aether Spouts, similar effect. I run this over Aetherize because I think it's worth the 1 more mana for the tempo loss that they have of having to draw their creatures or just lose those spells altogether. If they're just mediocre, they have to put them at the bottom of their deck. One of the thing with this deck too is it does take a fair amount of talking. I mean, if people are onto you, they're onto you, but if somebody's winning pretty hard, I mean, you can make the case that you should go for someone else or whatever. And with cards like Comeuppance and Aether Spouts, you can just tell people you have these. Whether or not you have them, you just say, hey, well, if you swing at me, all your stuff is going on top of your library. And again, you can get players to start starting little fights with each other and trading resources, and I mean, it's just exactly what you need is a little bit of political savvy to kind of get there. Evacuation, just another great card. I don't run any creatures, so unless you're getting really good ETB effects, this is almost always an advantageous card for me. One other thing to note with the Archaeomancer and Mnemonic Wall is once you get to 9 or 10 mana, you can just do this every turn. You can play your Archaeomancer, get back your Evacuation. On someone's end step, you can evacuate, get back your Archaeomancer, etc. So just really so many ways to just stall out the game, especially versus creatures with this deck. When I'm dealing with things that aren't creatures, I really like Revoke Existence. This is one of the cards I can go find with Muddle the Mixture. So when I'm at 5 mana and somebody just played that artifact or enchantment that just needs to go now, you know, something like a Whip of Erebos or something like that, this card's just really fantastic, and for a couple more mana you can double up on that effect or do it at instant speed with Return to Dust. Detention Sphere is another way to deal with tokens especially, but this is just a great utility card. This is what blue-white's all about, just dealing with whatever threat you need to and buying time and just breaking up synergies. You got to find the weak points in people's decks and just exploit them, and cards like this let you do that. Aether Tradewinds is another one of those cards that I can hit with the Archaeomancer. I can return him every turn and bounce whatever I need to. Once I'm at 7 mana, I could just repeat that effect every turn until my opponent comes up with something different. And again, if I have any of these effects that let me draw a second card every turn, something like that, like stalling them out and playing on my rules is really going to hurt them. It's going to be hard for them to come back once I have any kind of card advantage engine going. Condemn, it's just kind of an auto-include if you're running white. It's just a great card, 1 mana removal. Oblation, another great card that white has for utility. Funny thing is it fizzles with Dismiss in a Dream, so they won't draw cards. And in a pinch, you can Oblation your own thing if you need to just use this as a divination effect. Curse of the Swine is another card that I go get with the Muddle the Mixture transmute effect. Not everybody loves this card. I absolutely love this card, especially in this deck where I have like Portcullis, where the boars aren't even going to enter play, or I have Dismiss in a Dream, they won't even get the boars. It's just really hard for them to beat me to death with boars in this deck. I can Aether Spouts or whatever. And the fact that you're exiling things is just so devastating to your opponent because there's a lot of recursion out there. There's a lot of ways to get things back, and this just shuts that down. The card that I search for the most with Expedition Map is Glacial Chasm. This might not seem that insane at first because it has this cumulative upkeep. So each upkeep I pay 2 life, and then I pay 4, and then I pay 6. But this is a really great way to stall out the game when you've just lost. So, I mean, you tap out and you do a thing, and then you play this and sack one of your tapped lands, and you just say, all right, you've got a couple turns to either deal with Glacial Chasm, or I'm going to hopefully draw an answer and deal with whatever threat you had that made me cast or play this card in the first place. You saw a couple of ways I have to return this to my hand, like Capsize or Aether Tradewinds, but what's really nutty is this last card in my deck I'm going to show you called Trade Routes. So for 1 mana, I can return Glacial Chasm back to my hand. If I get to a point in the game where I've got like 10 mana, I really don't mind, like every other turn, paying 2 life and sacking a land to stop you from killing me. I can do that for quite a while, or I can leave Glacial Chasm in play and then hit Resolute Archangel. This card's also fine without the Chasm, because if you're getting flooded, you can just discard land cards to draw a card, and if you're really in a bind and you're just digging for an answer, you can start bouncing your own lands to your hand and discarding them. I know it's an expensive price to pay, but if you just need to draw into a Day of Judgment, this is just one more way to get through your deck. So that is my Isperia All the Dirtles deck. Again, this is not really a nice way to play Magic. A lot of people would prefer you have a win condition and kill them with it, but I really like to take a deck and push it as hard as I can in one direction and say, my deck does this. And this is absolutely the dirtiest deck I could possibly make. People kind of think of it as like a level on a video game or a puzzle that you have to solve, and some of them actually really appreciate playing against this deck and kind of the politics that you play when you have this deck and maybe another like really threatening mid-range control deck at the table. You know, at what point in time do you go after me or go after them? And obviously this is going to be a long deck tech video because it's a dirtle deck, and I might as well just dirtle while I'm talking about it. But if you want to build a control deck for 2DH, this is a great starting point. Check out these cards, figure out which one works with your strategy, add some win conditions if you must. You get extra bonus points if you include Dismiss into Dream. I mean, the card's pretty great with staffing in. You don't need as many build-arounds as I have here, but this is the thing I chose to do. It's been quite effective. I've had a lot of success with the deck. I've have people who are infinitely scooping to this deck as we speak because they said they will never play against it again. So I will try to play something friendlier the first time you come out to 2DH, but when you have a competitive deck and you're ready to take her on, we can have a little Dirtle Fest. Check out the links below for our Facebook group and the full deck list. I'd love to have you join the group. Check out what we're doing. We're getting a lot of value out of Jank. We're spending $40 a deck, and we're having tons of fun. So check us out. Also, shout out for Card Kingdom for just being a great shop to play at and supporting the growth of the format. Thanks for watching, guys.